Inflation is viewed as one of the most important economic indicators across the globe. In an ideal world, we would know exactly how much people spend on every single good and service, and exactly how much each of these rises and falls in price over time. We could then figure out the exact change in the price level over the course of the year, giving us our value for inflation. However, this is not really feasible. Even for one good, we have different types, brands, and quality levels. Different regions and different stores will have special offers and different prices for the exact same good. The government would thus have to record millions and millions of prices every single month. So, in order to measure inflation in reality, we have to compromise. The most commonly used measure of increases in the price level is the Consumer Price Index, CPI. CPI doesn't measure the price of every single good and service, but rather it takes a fixed basket of goods which is meant to represent what the average household buys over the course of a month. The goods in this basket are then weighted by the proportion of income a typical consumer spends on them. In the UK, we monitor prices of around 720 goods and services. This basket of 720 is fixed for 1 year, so we can monitor how the price of the basket changes over time, and we don't have to worry about measuring the prices of really niche goods that most people don't buy. The ONS in the UK looks at around 180,000 price quotations each month from different shops to get an estimate of how the prices are changing. Clearly, this measure of inflation isn't going to be perfect, because we're only using a sample instead of measuring price changes of absolutely everything in our economy. However, there is a slightly more subtle reason why the CPI is inaccurate. This is called commodity substitution bias. This bias arises because we fix our basket of goods for the year. At the start of a year, we will estimate that the average person will spend, say, 40% of their income on rent, 20% on transport, 10% on clothing, and so on. We assign a higher weighting to items people spend more money on. These are the broad weightings for certain categories of goods, showing, for example, that we spend more money on housing than on alcohol. So the CPI is impacted more by an increase in the price of housing. These weightings are also broken down in much more detail for specific goods in a big spreadsheet that you can download online. However, there is an issue with estimating the proportion of income people spend on each type of good and holding this fixed for 12 months. If prices change over the course of the year, which is kind of the whole point of measuring inflation, people may decide to change the proportion of their income that they spend on a particular good. As an example, the CPI currently uses a weighting of 2.73 on beef. This effectively means that the average person spends 0.273% of their income on beef products. Imagine that there was suddenly a disease amongst cows which massively reduced supply, and this caused the price of beef to shoot up by 50%. Well, consumers would purchase a lot less beef because it's now so expensive, and maybe because they're scared of this new disease. People might instead buy another meat like pork or lamb at a lower price, since these foods are substitutes for one another. This weighting of 2.73 is thus no longer accurate. Maybe people would now only spend 0.008% of their income on beef, so the weighting should be 0.08. The issue is that the 2.73 weighting is fixed for a whole year. This means our CPI index is overestimating the impact of the increase in beef prices, as it thinks people are still buying lots of beef, and so the prices of their shopping baskets are now much higher. The truth is that we aren't spending much more because we're buying other, cheaper things instead. We've substituted one commodity for another, hence the name commodity substitution bias. Not only this, but each of these other goods have their own weightings, which are now also inaccurate because people will buy more of these goods. This effect thus means the CPI is inaccurate. But it's not just a case of consumers switching from one good to another that biases the CPI. Over the course of the year, government statisticians continue to visit the same stores to see how prices have changed. However, imagine that a new, really cheap store opens up during the course of the year. Everyone will go and shop here and benefit from lower prices. But the CPI won't pick this up because it continues to measure the price at the older, more expensive stores. Again, this means people aren't spending more because they switch to somewhere cheaper. But the CPI still records a higher price from a store that people are now avoiding. This is known as the discount stores effect. Similarly, there's an effect known as the new goods problem, where a new good may be introduced which is cheaper or higher quality than existing goods. As this is by definition a new good, it won't be included in our basket of goods. Consumers will thus have a cheaper or better alternative, but the CPI is still only measuring the price of the older good that no one is buying anymore. A number of studies have looked at estimating the size of the commodity substitution bias. This does vary across countries because the CPI is calculated using a slightly different methodology by different governments. They may, for example, have fewer goods in their basket of goods, record prices at more stores, or update their basket less frequently. In Canada, the bias was estimated to be around 0.2% per year from 2005 to 2009. Studies in the United States have estimated that the CPI overestimates the cost of living by around 1% every year. This of course will vary each year depending on how high inflation is, as we might not see a very large bias when inflation is near zero and prices aren't changing. You can also imagine how a disruptive event like a pandemic will greatly change what people buy and where they buy it, potentially increasing the bias. The effect will have very real impacts on an economy, with the CPI being used to adjust prices over time in all types of contracts, and being used in cost-benefit analysis for major projects in both the public and private sectors. Many people also pay or receive money based on the CPI. For example, pension payments may be adjusted every year using CPI inflation. If inflation is overestimated, people may receive more money than necessary to maintain their standard of living. The most obvious way to reduce the commodity substitution bias is to update the basket of goods more regularly. In Canada, the basket is updated every 2 years, while in the UK this is done annually. The more frequent this is, the more reflective the basket of goods will be of the representative household. The CPI will pick up on new goods and people switching to cheaper goods or stores. But this is a trade-off. We said that in an ideal world we would record every single price in an economy and how this changes over time. But this is not feasible, primarily because it would be far too expensive to keep checking all of these prices. The same is true for updating our basket of goods very frequently. To do this, we need to keep taking samples of what people are spending on and where they're doing this spending. For most governments, it doesn't make sense to do this more than once every year. The fact is that we'll always have some bias or inaccuracy in our estimate of inflation, so we have to make a judgment call about how much time and government money we're willing to spend in order to reduce the bias. It's likely that in the future, as more and more shopping is done online and we can get more data on shopping habits, we'll find more accurate ways of measuring inflation. For now, the most common method is the CPI, which, as with many things in economics, is not perfect. That will conclude this video. Please leave a like if you found it interesting, and subscribe to add some econ to your subscription feed.